Good afternoon. I'm actually pretty happy to be here. This was a group that think it's a Saturday, got lots to do. But this is an important group of folks, and I was looking forward to being able to speak with you today. And so the title of the session, I guess the whole conference, has to do with managing change, leadership and managing change. So I decided to focus my comments today on some new results that come out of analyzing data from the Gates Foundation's Measures of Effective Teaching project, some data that have not been analyzed yet, or at least some of them. This is the first time I've analyzed them, or anybody has. The data, the paper will be out in a book that will come out late in spring, but I decided to present some of that stuff here today because it gives more empirical evidence based on real data that leadership really does matter in some of the ways that it matters. And so I want to tell you about that. They just introduced, well, the introduction just said that my degrees are in economics, and I was looking around and saw some eyebrows go up. The way I got here is that I became an economist because I was interested in helping to address economic problems in the kinds of places where I grew up. I grew up in the blue-collar neighborhoods in Cleveland, Ohio, and was interested in economic development and so on. But during the first decade, when I was teaching economic development, state and local economic development, education kept coming up. And then when you think back to it in your Microeconomics 101 course, wages are a function of the value of the marginal product of labor. Well, so people getting paid what they know how to do, where they learn that? Well, basic reading and math skills are foundational there. Then in the studies of where businesses decide to locate, the quality of local labor force is the #1 reason that businesses locate where they do. And a lot of that comes off of what people have experienced in school. And it's not only school. Parenting matters a lot, too. It's a combination of parenting and what kids get out of school lays most of the foundation for what they later take into the labor force. So as an economist interested in improving people's incomes and lives more generally, I came to the conclusion that there's nothing more important than education, that education is actually our #1 economic development policy. And a lot of other economists have come to that conclusion too, so there's a lot of work going on these days by economists in education. I've gone a little bit further from the core of education than a lot of people have, but a lot of us have recognized that this is where the action is if we really want to have an effect on people's lives. So I pretty much always start off with a poem or two and end with a poem or two. I've been writing poems for educators for about a decade now, since one assistant superintendent said, these people need inspiration. So this is, I'm going to start, there are two little poems here that have to do with how teachers perceive professional development, because what I'm going to be talking about today is teachers as learners too. And the first one is called Where Fools and Experts Hovered. And it has to do with cynicism from the perspective of a teacher about principals coming back every year with a new idea, right? And then the second half of it has to do with a more preferred way of experiencing professional learning in the school. So Where Fools and Experts Hovered goes as follows. Every year you come the first day back with things that you've discovered when you went to all your conferences where fools and experts hovered. Yes, this is one such conference. Maybe not. There together they concocted all this brand new stuff to do. Then they handed you the package wherein you became the fool. You're a fool to think I'm waiting for your latest great idea. I've developed what I need myself. It's perfect, don't you fear. When you see my next year's test results, you'll see just what I mean. Then you'll know that you're superfluous and vanish from the scene. Wait, I was only kidding. Blowing off some excess steam. Please, come tell me of this year's idea. I'm sure it's quite a scheme. Then the second one is your courage and commitment. I love the way you've introduced the new approach we're taking. I'm really looking forward now to what we're going to do. I also like the fact that we will all do this together and that no one has the right to stand aside or be excused. The plans that you've described are so coherent and transparent that I really can't imagine we won't all know what to do. And the fact that you've relieved us of some old and stale commitments means we'll have the time and energy to really see this through. So thank you, fearless leader, for your courage and commitment. We have finally got a way to bring real greatness to this school. And so those are two different images of how professional learning might happen. My experience working with schools as a consultant is you can almost always find a small group of people who are excited about what you're talking about. The way I think about it is you can always get the choir to sing, right? But getting the congregation to sing is harder, okay? And we got to get the choir out of the pews and have them go around, stand next to people with the book in their hand who aren't singing and nudge them. Here, we're on line 3, you know, and just get them all together until you get the whole congregation singing. And that's one of the important things we need to achieve much more frequently than we do in our school improvement efforts. And a lot of folks are kind of figuring out how to get that done. What I'm talking about today doesn't take us all the way there. I've only got 35 minutes or so. But we're going there. So school leaders as change managers, new evidence that leadership matters. At the beginning here, I just thought I would talk a little bit about what's the overall societal goal when we talk about closing achievement gaps. I like to talk about overall excellence with group proportional equality, meaning the following. We start off with each group having its own bell-shaped curve. This might be the curve for blacks and Hispanics. Blacks and Latinos have very similar bell-shaped curves with most achievement measures these days. And there's another curve for whites that overlaps substantially with the curves for blacks and Hispanics, but it's further up to the right. The goal over time is to move both those curves up. Okay, we don't want to close the achievement gap by holding whites back or pulling them down. We don't even want to do it by just moving people of color up to where whites are now. We want everybody to be up there on a curve that's way out further to the right. Okay? So the societal goal is excellence with equity. And the international data show that even our white students are not leading the world, especially in mathematics. Okay? And so I think we are already in the early phases of a national movement. People are coming out of the woodwork trying to find ways to participate and be constructive. The business community is deeply afraid that they won't be able to replace the baby boom generation as we retire. And so there's lots of energy that's pent up, some of it already being expressed, that is ready to come and help with this. And as folks in positions of leadership, part of your job is to figure out how to help people wrap their minds around what there is to do and find a place in this bigger solution. Okay, if I was going to talk with you a lot longer, I would lay out a whole picture of what I think entails in the movement. And it's based on an ecological point of view where we want to change the quality of life where kids live it. So there's stuff about parenting and home life, about school, about peer dynamics, about employer engagement to get the business community involved, and about whole community engagement to give people a collective sense of responsibility for kids. Okay, and if we can get all that, if we can have things be healthy and just right at home, at school, and in the peer group, so kids' lived experiences change, we can make a lot of progress. And so wrapping your mind around that is important if you're in a position of leadership, because then you're looking out for opportunities to be able to affect parents and schools in a number of dimensions and peer dynamics. So with the parenting thing, we want to distinguish parenting, which is family dynamics, from parent engagement, which is how the school works with parents. There's some interesting stuff to do with parenting, okay? You're the school folks typically, but you can help to facilitate allies in the community that help to work with people, parents of new infants, and so on. So I'm going to go through what I have. If I have time, I want to come back and talk a little bit more about this bigger picture. But let me at least cover what I've got in the PowerPoint here first. Okay, so school leadership. The data that I'm working with here are data for 4th through 8th graders that participated or whose information came into play in the Gates Foundation's project on measures of effective teaching, the MET project. How many of you know anything about the MET project? Okay, so majority, but not quite everybody. The biggest project the world has ever seen on trying to get a handle on what effective teaching really entails. And so what I'm going to show you today, we're using 3 independent data sources, bringing them together. One is student surveys. I've, over the last decade, created and recreated what are called the Tripod Project surveys, where we survey students about what they experience in the classroom and then we feed that back into school communities for use in strategic improvement activities. And so our tripod project surveys, or at least the 7 C's of effective teaching and a couple other things, were the student voice piece of the Gates project. But we also here are using a teacher working conditions survey from the new Teacher Center. Eric Hirsch, who works there, was a collaborator with me in this paper. And here we're asking teachers how they experience the school as a learning and working environment. And then finally, we've got test scores from both from state accountability test and from a supplemental test, the balanced assessment of math and the SAT-9 that were also used. And I pull all those test scores together in one measure, and then we look at value added from one year to the next here. So we've got students' value-added data, we have teachers' assessments of the conditions from their perspective, we have students' perceptions of classroom conditions. And this is kind of the summary statement that we come to after I show you what I'm about to show you. So I'll show it to you now, and then I'll use it as a summary when we get back. But just to tell you where we're going, effective school leaders manage to foster school-level enabling conditions for teaching. So conditions that enable teachers to do their jobs. These help to inspire professional community citizenship and raise teacher expectations, both of which I'll define in a second. As more teachers become active believers, more students experience both academic press and academic support, and the result is higher levels of happiness in class, effort in class, inspiration to attend college, and value-added achievement gains, which are measures of learning. Okay, and so we're linking up from whole school conditions to teachers' attitudes and behaviors, to teachers' teaching practices, to outcomes for students. And the cool thing here is it's different data sources bringing together, coming to this story. So by enabling conditions, there are 4 main things we're talking about. First is that the school does a good job of managing student conduct. And one of the interesting things there, there are whole school conditions that are one layer back in the framework. I'm not giving you the whole framework just because we don't have time for it. But the interesting thing is the school managing conduct is strongly predicted by what teachers say about whether the community is supportive. And in fact, if you don't take into account what teachers say about the community is supportive, race helps to predict teacher expectations, between school differences and teacher expectations. But if you then put whether teachers say the community is supportive into the equation, it knocks race out of the teacher expectations equation. So differences across schools in teacher expectations that correlate with race are totally explained by the community conditions and what the teachers are telling us about their perception of whether the community is supportive. So school conduct, and we have professional development is actually effective at helping teachers to improve. So there are questions about professional development that have to do with whether professional development comports with sort of best principles of professional development. But then there are questions about whether it actually helps you. Does it actually help you improve? And it turns out if teachers don't agree that it actually helps them to improve, it makes no difference and actually can hurt. And so if you're spending a lot of time in useless professional development, that can decrease morale and lead to even more negative outcomes. So we need to keep checking in with teachers to know, are you experiencing this as helpful? And if you're not, let's think together about what we can do to make it so that it is helpful. But if it is helpful, if they do say professional development actually helps teachers here improve, then that does help to create more positive ripple effects through the other things that we care about. Then we get sufficient teacher autonomy, where the teachers think they have enough freedom to do things the way they want to, and where their time demands are reasonable. But the strongest 2 drivers of these enabling conditions are the first 2, are whether people think that behaviors and student conduct is well managed, and whether professional development is actually effective. Okay, the autonomy does help some, and the time demands help some, but the bigger 2 are the first 2. So by professional community citizenship that I mentioned a minute ago, these are the 3 items we use to measure it. It's easy for other teachers at this school to know what students learned in my class. I collaborate with other teachers to achieve consistency in how we assess student work. I have detailed knowledge of the content covered in instructional methods used by other teachers at this school. So these are questions where if teachers agree with these more, they're not stuck up in their class by themselves. They're out interacting with folks. in the rest of the business. They're professional community citizens, so to speak. And then for teacher expectations, these are the items that we use. I believe almost every student has the potential to do well on a particular assignment. I require students in my class to work hard. I believe that what I teach will make a difference in my students' lives. And those are three different notions of what people mean when they talk about teacher expectations. I often try to avoid talking about teacher high expectations because people mean so many things by it. It's just a vague term. But in this case, this is what we actually measure here. So we've got, again, the professional community citizenship and the teacher expectations. And then we can rate teachers as being above or below average on both those dimensions. So we have more than 1,300 teachers in this particular part of the analysis. We can rank order them by the answers they gave on this. And then we can create a 2-by-2 matrix. And so we have the teacher expectations of the columns and the rows of professional community citizenship. You have high or low, depending upon whether you're above or below average. And you get 4 types of teachers. So the active believers have high expectations, and they actively collaborate with their friends. They're good citizens, and they believe. Okay. On the other extreme, the isolated agnostics, they aren't so sure whether the kids can do it and aren't so sure about whether it really is important in kids' lives, and they kind of push kids, but maybe not that hard. And again, in the survey questions, I call them agnostics because they don't disagree. They don't say no. They just don't strongly agree. They don't agree as much as the believers do. So they're kind of agnostic on this expectation stuff. And they stay to themselves. Okay, they don't agree with those community questions. And then on the off diagonals, we got the active agnostics and the isolated believers. And I'm going to show you that these 4 types of teachers differ in the way they respond to school conditions. And school conditions translate into student outcomes differently for each of these 4 types of teachers. And there's a really interesting patterns that I'll show you in a minute or two. Okay, but first, talk a little bit about some teaching practices, because there we want to talk about academic support and academic press as some of the teaching practices that follow depending upon which teacher type you are, or at least the degree to which you get those depends upon which teacher type you are. So I mentioned in our tripod project surveys we have the 7 C's. And I think I saw some TFACs someplace, but this is not the TFACs. So this is, so care, confer, captivate, consolidate, and clarify. So care, for example, teacher makes me feel they really care about me. Confer, teacher respects my ideas and suggestions. Captivate, I like the ways we learn in this class. Consolidate, teacher takes time to summarize and clarify. My teacher explains difficult things clearly. All those are things that kids would typically welcome. They're supportive. Then we get press, which is challenge and control. So we have press, challenge for effort and for rigor. So for effort, it might be my teacher accepts nothing less than our full effort. And for rigor, my teacher wants us to use our thinking skills, not just memorize things. Okay, and obviously these are examples of items. There are multiple items for each of these things. And then control, our class stays busy and doesn't waste time. So you got an on-task behavior, and there's some other additions. On control, we also ask whether the kids behave the way the teacher wants them to, whether the student behavior makes the teacher angry, those kinds of things. So it's an orderly on-task classroom, and where the teacher is pressing kids to work hard and think hard and persist in the face of difficulty and so on. That's challenge and control. And so from here forward in the presentation, we just slurp the support C's into support and challenge and control into press and look at how those play out. Okay, and so academic press and academic support, it turns out, each have distinct effects as predictors of the student outcomes, both engagement and learning outcomes. Press and support are each important, but they matter differently in the following way. And this comes from these are multiple regression coefficients. If you don't know what that means, a lot of you will know what that means. But taller is better here. Okay. And so what we see, and we've got 4 different equations predicting the things on the horizontal axis. So we predict value added, we predict happiness in class, we predict effort in class, and we predict whether the student says, my teacher inspires me to want to go to college. So that's the college inspiration. If we look at value added, we see it's entirely press. There may be ways that support undergirds press. So for example, you can't press effectively if you can't clarify. But once you have taken into account press, it knocks support out of the equation. And if we think about value-added achievement gains, we're talking about gains on standardized tests, and kids are probably more likely to get those gains if they've actually learned some new stuff, and they're more likely to learn some new stuff if they kept going when it got hard, and they had more time on task. If you look at classes of teachers who don't manage time well and those who do, you can have as much as 2 months difference in time on task during one school year. There's one study that looked at how long it took a teacher to get kids settled down at the beginning of the class when they first came in, when they started wrapping up before recess, how long it took to get resettled after recess, then the pause before lunch, and then after lunch, and at the end of the day. And you take that time as a fraction of the school day, it can be a substantial fraction of the school day. And so you can have huge differences in time on task as part of the control thing. And also on the challenge, you can have teachers who don't push kids when they feel like giving up, and who just let kids just memorize instead of really understanding. And so that's all the value added is coming off of challenge. And it's not that support doesn't matter, but support probably matters only there as it enables challenge. Okay? But then we get to happiness in class, and that's entirely academic support. And the fascinating thing is college inspiration is entirely academic support. Okay? And then effort in class is both support and press. Kids' own perception of how hard they're working in class. These particular calculations come off of trying to understand between school differences, but you get pretty much the same pattern if you're looking at within school differences across classrooms. Okay, achievement gains are driven by press. The emotional stuff is driven by support, right? And we want both of those. It's as if you want to get the short-term gains, you got to just put the pedal to the metal, and you get the learning gains, but you also want to inspire a love of learning, so the kids just want to learn even when they're not being forced to. And the support stuff can help with that. So it's not either or, but both, but they do matter differently. And a lot of places have a lot of support, not much press. Okay, where everybody's happy, it's a really nice environment. You may not have a whole lot of learning going on, even though everybody's happy. Okay, now, wait a minute. So the next several slides show that, well, let me set it up. What we did is we took teachers' responses on the enabling conditions. So we have an index that takes those 4 enabling conditions, makes one number, and then you rank order all the teachers, in these 1,300 teachers in these 203 schools, just rank order the teachers by their answer to the enabling conditions. So we have some teachers who are really happy, who say, yeah, oh yeah, student conduct is managed well, and we have plenty of freedom here, and they don't put too many time demands on us, and professional development is really effective. And you have other teachers who don't agree with those. So you rank order that, you chop that into quartiles, right? And so we're going to ask, how do student outcomes differ by quartiles of that enabling index? We're going to ask that separately for each of the 4 teacher types. Okay, so when I show you graphs that look like this, and they have those little 4 dots on them, those 4 dots correspond to the teacher's responses to the enabling index. Intuitively, you can say, how happy are they with the school? How happy are they that the school is an environment where good teaching is possible? Right? And so here, first thing that jumps out at you is the active believers line is kind of flat over there, which is kind of telling us, with regard to effort in class, with regard to students' self-reports of their effort in class, the active believer teachers are getting about the same level of effort no matter what they think about the building. And what we're going to see as we look through here is that for the active believer teachers, they're getting a job done no matter what the building condition is. Okay? And in fact, their line tends to be a little downward sloping, where the ones that are least happy with the building get the most done. And it's probably because they have higher standards. Okay, so they've got higher standards in judging what's going on in the building, and they have higher standards in teaching their kids. And the downward slope is not a statistically significant downward slope, but it shows up on every slide but this one. And you'll see it as we click. In fact, let me click through quickly. Just watch that active believer thing down there. See how it's always downward sloping there? So that's what's going on with the active believer teachers. But you see, the other three here, the happier they are with the enabling conditions, the better job they're doing in getting their kids to exert effort. Okay? And remember, the enabling conditions are the conditions at the building level that leadership puts in place. And we talked about, well, again, managing building level behavior control, making sure professional learning is actually effective. You're not just going through the motions. Making sure the time demands aren't unreasonable and teachers have some degree of autonomy. And the better you're doing on those, the better teachers produce results with their kids. This is happiness in class. Looks very much like effort, a little bit different, not a whole lot different. This is inspires me to want to go to college. Now, the main thing you see there, the change from the previous diagrams is what? The isolated agnostics. The others look pretty much like the last couple diagrams. But here, how effectively the isolated agnostics inspire their kids to want to go to college doesn't really vary with the quality of the enablers. It's kind of a tone, probably something in the way that they communicate, inspiring kids. And it's often at a really low level. It's often, okay, it's not only that it's flat, it's low and flat. So the isolated agnostics are not inspiring their kids to want to go to college the way that others are. Academic support, that's those first 5 C's. And we see here that again, the isolated agnostics, there's not much difference between those in the bottom 3 quartiles on the teaching enablers. The top quartile, the quartile, the 1/4 of isolated agnostics who are most happy with the building do have a climate in their classroom that gets the kids to say, yeah, support is high in here. The teacher cares and makes things interesting and clarifies and consolidates and interacts with us. That's confer. The other 3 are pretty low. But look at the sharply downward sloping for the active believers on this. Then academic press looks like that. And then value added. Value added learning gains. Isolated agnostics produce the most learning when they are least happy with the school. You can imagine what that looks like. What's making them unhappy? Leadership. Right? The isolated agnostics are the teachers who want to stay in their room, don't want to talk to anybody, don't really believe the kids can do it. They're totally blaming the kids for everything. And they got a principal or an assistant principal who's always in and out of the room, reminding them about things to do. They're getting in their business. All right? And so they're not that happy, but they're getting some work done. Right? If you go back a couple slides, wait a minute. The support, they're making their kids feel supported. If we go all the way back to happiness in class, effort and happiness, the lines are sharply upward sloping. So the image you get there is that from the isolated agnostic, what their kids are experiencing in class, if the teacher is happy with the school, is the class is kind of a happy place. Okay. But there's probably, if we go back and compare support and press, this top one is higher up than the support thing. So it's more about support than press in those classrooms. And so you can just imagine that you've got classrooms where it's pretty superficial. what's going on. Kids aren't really being pushed to work that hard. So they're happy, but they're not that productive in terms of really getting the kind of learning done that shows up on the test score gains. And when people talk about courageous leadership, it's probably partly about calling out the people who aren't getting the work done. Okay, being willing to have those difficult conversations. We did a study a couple of years ago. Actually, you can download this from our website, agi.harvard.edu, on exemplary high schools. And there's agi.harvard.edu for the Achievement Gap Initiative, and there's tripodproject.org for the Tripod Project. But on the AGI website, if you look at our report on exemplary high schools, we tell the stories of 15 high schools that do a really good job, mostly with kids from less advantaged backgrounds. And the most memorable thing I found from that project was two little phrases. One of the schools that went through a big positive transformation, got a lot of people do what they didn't want to do, and I was talking to the principal. I said, there must have been some angry conversations in the hallway, getting this many people to do things they didn't want to do. She said, oh no, never raised our voice. But she said, but there are two little phrases that were helpful. I said, please tell me. The first one is, help me understand. Okay. You got a resistor in front of you telling you they either can't or won't do what you just asked. Just help me understand that. I want to understand it. And then they tell you something, and if it doesn't make sense to you, you can follow up with it. Help me understand that. Okay, and so you can harass them with that question, right? And then when you get to the point where they say, I just can't do it, let us help you. It's hard for a resistor to get around, help me understand, and let us help you. Okay, although if you say let us help you, you better have the ability to help, right? So the isolated agnostics are a case, but also the active agnostics and the isolated believers in the middle, we see there too, it looks like it really matters what your school's enabling conditions are, and it matters for all 6 of the things we looked at. They're from effort in class to happiness, to inspires college aspirations, to academic support, to academic press, to value added. Okay, remember these data are coming from different sources, so it's not just one respondent telling you these things. All those outcomes are coming from a different source than the teacher survey that's providing the classifications for the teachers. All right, so I want to shift now gears and talk about one other issue. That we have a project called Pathways to Prosperity that's about school-to-career transitions, and the fact that the College for All movement, as noble as it is, diverts our attention from the fact that there are a lot of kids who are just not going to be four-year college graduates. We could wish it all we want to wish it. But right now, only about a third of all American young people become four-year college graduates. If you add in the two-year degrees, it's up to 40%. If you go to kids of color, it's down around 20%. Okay? So it's as if we got this big 6-lane interstate highway that's the road to a four-year college degree. And kids get on it in early elementary, and they go all the way to 16 years of schooling. And we pretend everybody's going to travel that highway. And so we don't need to worry about the rest of the road system, because we don't really want anybody to use that anyway. Right? And so what happens with the rest of the road system is it ends up in total disrepair. Our community colleges, some of them are great, but a lot of them are a mess. And so it's as if in that other road system there are dead ends and streets with no street sign, and that's, you know how frustrating that is. You get to the corner, there's no street sign, you don't know where you are. Vacant buildings, potholes, it's just a messy road system. So we need to find, the message should be every child needs some kind of certification for the world of work after they get out of high school. They need to graduate from high school, and then they need some kind of certification that puts them on path to be an effective, healthy adult. And there are a lot of good jobs that do not require a four-year college degree. There's some people who get a four-year college degree and go back to a community college to get a skill, right, that they can actually market. And so there are lots of kids who right now feel like everybody's better than me at everything. School is hard. I don't like school. I don't know what's going to happen in my life. And a lot of those kids are lost. The full-time employment rate of black male youth who don't go to college in the October following high school graduation is 5%. 1 in 20. Black male youth, For white male youth, it's 25%. But even there, you got 3/4 of them do not have full-time jobs. We're not in school, and they did graduate from high school. Okay? There's a little chart I like to use. If you look at this chart, imagine those are 3 different kids, and those are different kinds of skills on the axis. A is really good at type 2 skill, C is really good at type 1 skill, B is in the middle and is not as good as anybody on anything. Okay, A specializes in 2, but B isn't as good on 1 as A is on the thing they don't even specialize in. Okay, and there are a lot of kids like B. There have to be, just by the, you know. And so, what do we do to help B keep hope alive? Part of it is backing off of this perpetual college for all, if college for all means 4-year college degree. If it doesn't mean 4-year college degree, I find the semantics difficult because we're playing with definitions of the word associations. So I like certification after high school, which could be a 4-year college degree, but it could be a truck driving certificate in an 8-week program. Okay? So what do we tell B? What we tell B is that there's something that needs to be done in the world where you got no competition. If we think about that green dot, who's in the lead to get there? B. But they got to figure out what their green dot is. Okay? And so there's work to do around what we call possible selves. And we need to convince kids there's nobody ahead of you, but you've got to figure out where it is you're going. And when you figure that out, you just work hard to get there, to be the best you that you can be. And there may be obstacles, there may be times when you feel like there's competition, but the competition is really not to get to your green dot. You've got to figure out what that is. Okay? And if you figure it out and don't give up, you'll be successful. Okay? And A and C will be successful too. Everybody can get to where they were trying to get to. Okay? There are 2 poems I want to close out with. One is related to the green dot issues, and the other is related to school leadership. And I think I'll do the school leadership one first, and then do the other one. The school leadership one is called I'm Finally a Principal. Let me see what comes after this. Let me see. I'll put it back there. I was once a classroom teacher. Now I try to run a school. When I first got this promotion, I thought it was really cool. I knew it would be a challenge, but I thought I was prepared, so I stepped into the job and started pulling out my hair. Some teachers here expected me to carry all their burdens. When I gave their burdens back, I was a quite unwelcome person. And some parents thought they had the right to pick their children's teachers. When they didn't get their way, they said I was an evil creature. But I never raised my voice and always tried to be respectful, even when I was contending with adults who were neglectful. No, instead I tried to model what I hope will be the norm when the teachers and the parents finally help this school reform. If we're going to be successful, we have got to have a vision wherein grown-ups join together in a shared and sacred mission. Anyone who can't accept it is quite free to move along, and together we'll rejoice when those who've held us back are gone. For the future is upon us, and there is no time to waste, as new first graders learn to read and soil their hands with paste. When we blink, they'll be in high school, so there's work to do each year, and we'll show the same commitment to each child who comes through here. We are here to nurture children in the best way that we can. Anyone who shares this purpose, I invite to take my hand. But I will not compromise with those who choose the status quo. I say one way or the other, they have got to change or go. Yes, sometimes it will be stressful. But you'll see that in the end, this will be a school we're proud of. Then we all can be great friends. I was once a classroom teacher. Now, I try to run a school. Yes, it makes me pull my hair out. Still, I think it's pretty cool. So, the last one is, all they said was graduate. If we're going to talk longer, we could talk about this notion. We don't tell kids what they're supposed to learn what they're supposed to get out of high school. We just tell them, you got to graduate from high school. So this is from the perspective of one of those kids. Vacant jobs, the big sign says. But nowhere do I see a way to get myself prepared so they can hire me. They told me if I did the work to graduate high school, I'd be prepared to have success, and life would be real cool. I wonder why they lied to me. It wasn't really fair. Now here I am, alone and broke, and no one seems to care. All they said was graduate, and that's just what I did. I did enough to pass each class. I was a real good kid. No one ever told me that I needed to get skills, that what I learned in school could someday help me pay the bills. All they said was graduate. I thought it was enough. So here I sit now clueless, worried about all kinds of stuff. If only they had told me that high school was preparation, a place to get the skills I'd need to find a good vocation. If only they had told me that I actually need to learn, that mastery, not just passing, should have been my main concern. Maybe if some classes were more closely linked to working, I'd have spent more time on task and less time goofing off or shirking. And I know that lots of teachers said that I should go to college, but they never made it clear that to do that, I needed knowledge. As kids, we count on grown-ups to help us find our way. When they fall down on that job, we sometimes tend to go astray. At this point in life, I look for hope, reject despair, but it will help me quite a bit if I could know you really care. So, I'm done. I think we're supposed to do Q&A? Okay.
So we're going to have a little bit of time for some Q&A. Ashley over here has the microphone. If you would like to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we will have Ashley come over and find you, and you can ask your question.
But if you're loud, you can just stand up and speak loudly.
Okay. Well, I'm waiting for somebody to ask a question. I want to say, I meant to mention the parenting thing. And we're going to saturate communities with messages for early childhood caregivers. And we have what we call the fundamental 5 of early childhood caregiving. And since some of you are probably parent, you might want these. First one is maximize love, minimize stress. We want to be conscious of what stress looks like for toddlers and infants. We often aren't thinking about loud, sudden noises, people arguing and fighting, and so on. The second one is talk, sing, and gesture a lot. Now, I know a lot of people in your generation are actually teaching your babies baby sign language. Some of the experts say that really doesn't make much difference, but gesturing, just pointing, helps a kid interpret what you're talking about. And kids will start to point to communicate and to interpret before they can talk. The third is use number games to lay the foundation for numeracy, helping kids get a sense of ordinality and sequence and magnitude and just that intuition, that brain architecture that's going to lay the foundation for math. The fourth is encouraging and enabling spatial awareness. So allowing a toddler, as soon as they can crawl, to crawl around in little cluttered spaces where you can't see around something, and their mind's eye is picturing what's on the other side of the thing they're about to crawl around, or remembering what was there. Okay, so it's that mind's eye kind of thing that we use for doing algebra and using geometry, but also for running hurdles. Okay, and the fifth is discussions, not just book reading. And so you want, as soon as they can give you some feedback, there's a discussion during book reading, and you want it to have a mix of higher order and lower order thinking. And the mnemonic for higher order is remember, explain, anticipate. And you can use it not only during book reading, but also walking around the neighborhood and doing other things. So remembering, explaining, anticipating. Those 5 things, there's good research for the importance of all of them in nurturing early childhood development. And we've got a project we're developing called Seeding Success, where we're going to saturate neighborhoods with these things, have extended family members reminding parents, and so on and so forth. But I thought I would throw that out there. And on the Achievement Gap Initiative website, you can go get on the email list. You can sign up to get on the email list there. And as this thing evolves, we're going to be seeking additional communities also to do this project. And so I threw that out there. And also, there's a project around the Green Dot Project. We're also working on something to try to work on that, including attention to giving young people more control over their own youth culture. Because a lot of kids are trapped in their youth culture. They don't actually like it, but they act like they like it because they think everybody else does, and they don't realize that most other people don't like it either. There's a phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance, where people misread one another's values and preferences. So we have to find ways to help everybody know what other kids really think, and then help them conspire together to put in place a youth culture that is closer to what they all would prefer in any case. Okay, so questions? Yes?
I'm really struck by the balance that you showed between the outcomes that come from pressing students
Yes.
and this long-term sustainability that you'll get from caring about students.
Yes.
Given that, what are your recommendations for us as building leaders when we think about what to prioritize with our teachers when we're giving them feedback?
Everybody in the back, she said, given that press and support predict different outcomes, what's the advice to teachers when you're working with teachers to talk about the priorities in the building? That's really a policy decision. I mean, what are your priorities in the building? Are you trying to maximize growth on the test? If all you care about is growth on the test, then stressing kids out is going to be one way to get there. You know, just challenging them, making sure that they work hard, that they don't give up when it gets hard, that they really focus on understanding and not just memorization, and they stay on task. Okay? That's going to help you maximize growth. But turns out clarify. Among all the C's, if you don't have clarify, it's hard to have much of the others, right? So trying to figure out what are the things that kids struggle to understand, and does the teacher have a repertoire, multiple explanations for each of the things that kids struggle with? Because you can't make it captivating if you can't clear up the confusion. You can't signal to a child that you're really concerned and you care about them understanding it if you can't clear up the confusion. And you can't get them to persist if you can't give them that coaching. So if you're going to do anything, I often say, let's start with clarify, because it seems like it's in the background behind everything. Okay, you can imagine going through the building and having teachers for each subject put together a consensus list on the things that it is most difficult to help kids understand. And then you have teachers pool their best ideas for how to teach that stuff, and you share that, and then you move on from there. Otherwise, though, it's a matter of what do you care about? Do you care about long-term inspiration and love of learning, or do you care about maximizing test score growth? Now, the test scores matter. I got interested, my big shift in interest in education was when I learned that the black-white test score gap, measured using the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth in 1979, predicted most of the black-white hourly earnings gap. Okay? People's reading and math skills are the foundation for the skills that they sell when they go into the workplace. And if you've got fewer of those skills, you are of less value to employers. Right? So the tests measure what kids actually learn, so they're important. On the other hand, kids need to be motivated to be lifelong learners too. And that motivation is going to come off having enjoyed learning. So there's really, we got to do both. At any point in time, we might focus on one, but if we get too out of balance, then we're not where we want to be. Okay? Yes?
I think this room is full of people who lead schools and therefore obsessed with the caliber of people that are in their schools and that they can bring into them.
All right.
And I think probably most of us would incline, like, we had our pick. There's one quadrant of those four that we like the most of the teachers.
Right.
And I know this wasn't part of this study, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on, like, what produces those active believers? Like, and have we learned anything about certification, preparation, recruitment, like anything that makes teachers that, correlates with getting back to mind?
Yeah, actually, this study does address that some. Or at least, this study is cross-sectional, so we're inferring the time dynamic. We can't prove the causation. I should put that in as a footnote. But the patterns in these data are consistent with the idea that what produces higher percentages of active believers is school leaders who press people to actually participate in professional learning and who make sure that that professional learning is of a quality that it can really produce improvement. Okay? And we find that you get the school leadership can get the what I call professional community citizenship up before the teacher believer piece goes up. Okay? You can have a high level of professional community citizenship even if people aren't so sure about all the high expectation stuff. But if you've got the professional community citizenship, then they're working together in ways that are going to eventually bring their belief up. Okay? And what I've seen a number of places is you have to get people to act before they believe. If they don't believe, preaching at them is not going to help. Okay? You've got to require them to participate in activities while they will experience things that change their beliefs. Okay? I saw this almost 25 years ago watching work in Oklahoma. I've seen it recently in this study on exemplary high schools that we do. Okay? And there are ways to just harass people into participating. I mean, just asking them to help you understand why they're not. And after a while, they'll get tired of trying to explain it to you, and they just do it. Okay? Or you can set up teacher meetings where you have people bring student work to the teacher meeting. Okay? And you can pair people for part of that meeting. And you pair the people whose students are doing excellent work with the people whose students are doing terrible work. And they're teaching pretty much the same kinds of kids, similar kinds of things. And they sit and they look at the work and wonder, how are your kids doing that? Well, come visit my class. I'll show you. Looks like I'm getting a hook. So but anyway, but if you pick up the Exemplary High Schools report, if you go to the bottom of the front page of the website, you can just click on it there. And it's got sort of a little recipe in it. Particularly if you look at the appendix to Chapter 1, it kind of distills everything down to 3 pages. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks.